In this lecture, we're going to learn how to add transitions to our routes. In theory, the job of the router is to swap components when a different path is visited. Components are constantly leaving and entering the page. We'll be able to apply transitions to the components that are being swapped by the router. Open the app component file in your editor. In the template block, have a component called router view. The view router registers this component. Its job is to load the component we registered with the path that's currently being visited. If we want to be able to apply transitions, we need to add a slot property. We will add the vSlot directive to the router view component. We are going to destructure the slot properties for an object called component. Make sure the name of the object has a capital C. The reason we are grabbing a slot property is because we need access to the components that are being swapped. The view router does a lot of things behind the scenes when switching routes. By grabbing the component from the router view component, we are telling the router we want to control the process of swapping components. This will allow us to apply a transition to the components. Inside the router view component, we are going to add the component component. The component component can be considered a ghost component. It's a component registered by view. It doesn't render anything on its own. We can use it for loading a component dynamically. The component it'll render is the component we pass into the is property. We'll bind this property to this component. Next, we'll pass in the component slot property. The component component will render whatever component is provided by the router view component. Our original goal was to apply a transition. We will wrap this component with the transition component. We can add a transition like normally. We don't have to learn anything new for applying transitions to routes. For this example, we're going to recreate the fade animation we created in the section where we discussed animations and transitions. We'll set the name property to fade. The next thing we'll need to do is create the classes. To save some time, I'm going to add them to the component quickly. I'll see you in a moment. In the app component, I've added the style block. There are 3 classes I'm defining. This will create the fade effect for transitioning the page. Pause the video so you can copy these styles. The components shouldn't transition at the same time. We want the component leaving the page to transition first. Afterward, the new component for the route should enter the page. We can achieve this behavior by setting the mode property on the router view component to out/in. There's one last step we need to take. The transitions won't work if the components have multiple root elements. We'll receive an error if we attempt to transition a component with this structure. In the Views directory, open the Home and Song component files. Both components have multiple root elements. We're going to wrap the templates of both components with the main tag. This should prevent an error from being thrown. Go ahead with opening the application in the browser. Starting from the home page, I can navigate anywhere I want without a problem. The main difference from before is that the transitions will play in between navigations. This is how you can apply transitions to routes. The process is simple thanks to the APIs provided by Vue. Congrats! We're finished with the app. It took a while, but it was well worth the effort. Our journey with Vue isn't finished, however. There are a few more topics we'll need to discuss. We're going to continue working on the app to give it a more polished feel. Take a break before proceeding. Once your mind is fresh, go ahead to the next section.